Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to our webinar today on Roadmap to Internships and Job Search. We are going to go ahead and get started right here at 3 o'clock. We have quite a bit of content to get through, so I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to get through everything we want to talk about and have time to answer any of your questions that you may have. So I'm just going to jump right in here. The first thing that I do want to do is introduce my team. So my name is Kayla Hamilton. I am the coordinator for experiential programs in the University Career Center. Our assistant director is Brianna Hobbs, and then on the call with me right now, I have both of our administrative assistants, Amy Howell and Alyssa Ungerman. You might hear from any one of us throughout the Q&A if you have any questions and that we need to answer in there. So to give you an overview of where we are headed today, we are going to be kind of outlining the entire internship and job search process from beginning to end. So that starts with looking for and finding internships and jobs, whether that be online or through networking, applying for those jobs, interviewing for those jobs, some helpful resources that can help you along the way. Then we're going to highlight some of the impacts that this pandemic has had on this process and on these different markets. And then I'll also highlight some other experiences that you can gain besides internships and jobs during this time. And then hopefully we'll have plenty of time for all of your questions. If you do have questions throughout, feel free to put those in that Q&A area, and I will answer them live, or somebody on my team will get to them in the Q&A as well. So we do like to have a bit of an interactive portion to these webinars. So I'm going to ask everyone to go to menti.com and type in that code. You can also follow the QR code, or my lovely assistant Alyssa will post a link in the Q&A area that you can go to. But what I want to know is what resources or job sites or different things are you using at this time to search for different job and internship opportunities? This could be Handshake, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, company websites, Vault, any of the resources that we offer, speaking directly to people, anything that kind of falls within that. We want to know where everybody's looking. And we're going to hit on a lot of these throughout this presentation as well. But I'm just curious where you guys are all at right now. So I'll go ahead and pull up the results as we go too. So we have quite a few on Handshake, LinkedIn, Indeed. Yeah, these are all really great resources. And like I said, we're going to hit on all of these throughout the presentation today. We're going to kind of identify specific resources, which ones are the best to use for a different type of search, how we can utilize different filters on all of these. Glassdoor, that's another popular job board. Google is another great place that I think is often underutilized. Company-specific websites, word of mouth. Now that's a good one. That's one that's often not talked about, but we are going to be talking about networking today. And networking is a great way, and word of mouth is a great way to learn about different opportunities. So yeah, so it looks like based off of what we're seeing here, Handshake is kind of our leader, but it's followed close by LinkedIn and Indeed and some of these more popular job search boards, which is great. We're going to cover Handshake pretty well today because, as you know, here in the Career Center, we love to plug Handshake. It's a great tool to utilize as a student. It's where we do most of our communication with you guys and with our employers, and that you guys can do with employers. So we're going to take you through a little bit more in depth on that. But feel free to keep throwing those answers in there as you go. And I'll come back to this later and we can kind of see where everyone is. And maybe you'll find out throughout this process some different job sites that you can use besides the ones that you've most commonly gone to. But thank you for those answers so far. All right. So kind of what we were just talking about. So where is the best place to find an opportunity? Where are all of the job and internship opportunities located? So as we can see, Handshake is a popular one. Our school is a Handshake school. We post different employers and different jobs from those employers on Handshake specific for our students to use. Vault is another one that we really like as well. Vault, you can find different job and internship, not only jobs and internship opportunities, but resources for those as well, such as career guides. Interns can actually leave some reviews on the past experiences that they've done on Vault. And that's one thing that I know a lot of students really appreciate, is being able to see firsthand what another person's experience was. And I know for job boards such as Glassdoor, that's another thing people really appreciate on there. But when we talk about job boards, we're looking at things like LinkedIn, Indeed, Glassdoor, as we've said, and a lot of those more common ones like Google. And then a more underutilized, but probably one of the best places that we can look for different job and internship opportunities is actually on the company website. And so if you know a specific company that you want to work for either in the future or that you want to gain experience from, one of the best things that you can do is go straight to the source. Go to that company website and see if they list their opportunities right on their website. That's often where you're going to have to go to apply anyway. So it's best to kind of, like I said, go to the source and really narrow down those opportunities. When we get to one of these search engines, one of these job boards, there's a couple of things that we want to keep in mind. So I kind of have provided, not to overuse the title, I've provided a roadmap of the different things that we want to be thinking of when we're on these different job boards. So number one is use the filters. Almost all of these job boards contain some type of filter system so that you can look for internships specifically, maybe part-time jobs specifically, a specific location, a specific industry, a specific major based off of what employers are looking for. There's lots of different filters out there. And we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about these moving forward as well, and when we kind of dive into some of these job boards. But one thing that I want you to keep in mind is that while filters are a phenomenal way to narrow down our job search, they can also hinder some of the opportunities that we're looking for. So stay with me here. Filters, while you might have found, that you're looking for a specific part-time job that pays, that's in this industry, that's with this specific employer or something like that, you can put all of the filters that you want on there. But know that when you put too many filters on a job search or an internship search, that you might be filtering out some other opportunities that you would be very well qualified for, that you might be interested in. So I just want you to keep in mind that when we are using these filters, that we kind of play with the filters until we find a combination of formula that works for what we are looking for specifically. Find something that works for you. And we're going to dive in a little bit more into filters. We're going to go through Handshake and look at how those look on there. So we'll kind of get back into that in a minute. Number two is complete your profile. So within all of these different job boards, especially within Handshake or LinkedIn, you have the ability to kind of personalize your profile. You have a space where you can put in, your resume, your past jobs, your accomplishments, and we want to make sure that we're doing that. And I think one thing that kind of bogs a lot of people down in the job and internship search process is having to do this over and over and over again on many different job sites. So you might have built a profile on Handshake, and then you've built it on LinkedIn, and then you've done it on Glassdoor, and then you've done it on Vault. And then all of a sudden you feel a little bogged down and overwhelmed by the amount of information that you have to kind of put into these job boards. But it is really important that on the specific job sites that you're using, that you utilize those features of your profile. Complete them as much as possible so that the correct jobs and the jobs that you are qualified for and might be interested in, they'll actually come to you rather than you having to search for them. Because throughout this process, you'll find that you have job alerts that will come to you based off of different things that you've put in your profile, based on past searches that you've done. And this is a great way that you can kind of help yourself in the long run, is to complete your profile to its entirety, to not only help employers, find what they're looking for, but help you in your search. Next is to do your research. And so this doesn't just mean doing your research on a specific job or a specific industry or a company. This also means to do your research on the different job boards that you're using. So specific job boards like Handshake may work really well for somebody in, and I'm just throwing out hypotheticals out there, it might work really well for somebody in the marketing industry. But somebody in computer science may not find all of the same opportunities on there. And specific industries may have different job boards that work well for them. So do your research, find out where the companies and the types of employment that you're looking for, where they're posting online. Is it best to go to the company website? Are most of their opportunities on Glassdoor or Handshake or Indeed or LinkedIn? Do most of those jobs get found out by word of mouth? You'll want to set yourself up for success by looking early on at what types of jobs are using which types of job board and search engine. Next is to stay focused in your search. And so this is kind of a twofold thing. So one, stay focused in the sense that you want to set aside time for your job or internship search. If you're really serious about it, you should be setting aside some time every single day to devote to your job or internship search, whether that's 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it is. Schedule that time with yourself, put it as a meeting on your calendar, and really sit down and focus on your job search. The next part of that is staying focused in your specific search. So knowing what type of opportunities you're looking for, and knowing which types of filters to use so that we are really narrowing down our search and not getting bogged down by the extreme number of jobs and internships that are out there. Because when you go onto a job board for the first time and you type in a rather vague explanation or keyword of what you want, you're going to be met with thousands, maybe millions of jobs, and it can be extremely overwhelming. So it's really important that we stay focused in our search, know what we are looking for, and knowing the types of filters that are going to kind of get us to where we need to be. The next point that I want to hit on is watching for scams. And since this time of COVID and the pandemic and the way that the internship and job industry has changed, scams have become very prevalent on different job sites. So while a place like Handshake may be a little bit more reputable, we still want to be very skeptical of all of the jobs and internships that we're looking for on these job boards. So making sure that we're reading everything very thoroughly. And if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So making sure that, is there a succinct interview or application process? Am I going to be speaking with an actual person? Am I being, supplied a job without actually having applied for it? These are some really good kind of red flags that we can look for. When we find a scam, making sure that we're telling somebody else about it, whether that be the Career Center or information security, somebody that can kind of help mitigate that issue and help future students not fall for the same scam. And we have a big presentation on scams coming up in early November. So if you want to learn more about avoiding internship and job scams on the internet, then you can sign up for that on Handshake, and we will talk more about that in that webinar. Next, I do want to talk about setting up alerts and saving opportunities. So these are two really great ways that we can help focus our search. So if you set up alerts based on industries that you're looking at, specific jobs that you're looking at, or on companies, then again, the jobs are going to come to you. And the next thing we want to do is save opportunities. So almost every job board that we use has some sort of a save button so that maybe one day you are identifying all of the jobs and internships that you want to eventually apply for. You can save those jobs, come back to them later, and then that day is the day that you are going to sit down, tailor your resumes, and send them out. And it can help us really focus our search and be very organized in our search. And then the next point that I want to make is finding the right site. So kind of like I said with doing your research, we want to make sure that the sites that we're using are the best one for the opportunities that we're looking for. So if you aren't having much luck using Glassdoor and finding opportunities on there in your specific industry or for your specific job, then stop using Glassdoor, move on to the next one. Now you might have to play with some sites. You might have to go through multiple different job boards to find what you like, to find the ones that have the filters that you know how to use and utilize. But do that. It's worth the effort in the end, when you can find and focus on the correct jobs for you. So find the right site, talk to other people that have utilized these sites, and play with them and figure out which ones work for you. So now we're going to do a brief practice. So I'm going to go to kind of the 3 sites that I have highlighted throughout this so far, starting with Handshake, and we're going to look at what the job search looks like on these different sites. So starting off with Handshake, which let me log in. So starting off with Handshake, this is what your student view on Handshake will look like when you log in. There's this very convenient jobs tab right here out in the open. So you'll click on that. And the first thing that you're going to be met with is all of the jobs and internship opportunities that are out there, unfiltered. This is everything. There's 7.6 thousand jobs and opportunities right now. So now we're going to utilize our filters to find the different types of opportunities that work for us. So with Handshake specifically, we can filter this by job type, including internships, part-time and full-time opportunities, on-campus jobs, regular jobs. We can do this by paid roles. One thing that I like is the employer preference. So employers will preference that they want a specific major or a specific school year or a graduation date. And so if you select these things, you'll find jobs and employers that are looking for students that match your exact specifications, your exact qualifications. You can do this by work authorization, and then most traditionally by industry type of job function, major, and employer. And so this is kind of what I'm talking about with, we don't want to get bogged down by filters. If I were to select a filter within each one of these different categories, I might be met with 4 or 5 jobs or internships that meet my exact qualifications. But 1, I might not be interested in any of them or only 1 or 2 of them. And 2, I've probably filtered out a lot of good jobs and internships that I could have seen, but I didn't because I over-filtered. So definitely set a few filters for yourself, whether that's setting it for internships, if a paid role is really important, and then at least by industry or major. But again, if we over-filter, we will be filtering out some great opportunities that we might not have seen because employers might just not have specified. Even if you qualify for it, maybe they didn't fill out the entire application specifying every little thing that's on here. So again, do not over filter. And then when I'm looking at specific jobs, what I'm going to do on Handshake is I'm going to read through, decide if this is a job that I want to apply for. And on Handshake specifically, there's 2 different ways that you'll be asked to apply for a job. So the first one is to apply externally. So what that does is if I click on that, I'm going to be taken to an external site, most likely the company site, to apply for that job on their specific application on their site. Additionally, this might just say apply, in which case you'll actually be applying through Handshake. And if you have filled out your profile to its entirety, it's a lot easier to apply for that job because things like your resume are already ready to go. Things like your prior job experience are already in there, and some basic questions will have already been answered. So it makes it really easy to apply to multiple jobs. Then we also talked about the saved feature. So on Handshake specifically, if I'm interested in this job, I can click save here. And under my saved jobs, I can find all of the jobs that I've saved previously. Additionally, I can look by specific employers. And I think this is a great tool, especially if you know a specific employer that you would like to work with or gain skills from. You can look up that employer and follow them, and you'll be alerted anytime that they post an opportunity or an internship or an interview on campus. The last thing that I want to cover with Handshake is your profile specifically. Like I said, we want to fill out our profile to its entirety so that it's easier for us to find jobs and for the jobs to find us. So with Handshake, you can upload your resume and it will fill in some of these things for you. But what I really want to highlight here is this section. So if you've never really played in Handshake, you'll want to make sure that your profile is public to employers so that they can see your profile and all of its contents. And next is you're going to want to fill out your interests, things like the types of jobs that you're interested in, the cities that you want to work in, the roles, and the industries. This is where Handshake is going to specify different jobs to send you and to alert you about. So Handshake will kind of be doing that work for you. So make sure that you're filling out that section too, so that you can find those opportunities a little bit easier. So that was a more in-depth view of Handshake. Obviously, I could spend an entire hour just going through all of the different things that Handshake does, but I really recommend that if you haven't spent a lot of time in Handshake, that you kind of go through and play in there, play with the different filters to see what works for you. I'm also going to do a really brief overview of LinkedIn specifically. So LinkedIn's pretty cool in the sense that there are a lot more opportunities probably listed on LinkedIn than there might be on Handshake. Some downsides of that is you might find more scams on LinkedIn. You might find shadier jobs or companies that aren't as reputable on LinkedIn. So we really want to be kind of more skeptical when we're looking at a site like this. But you can still find a lot of great opportunities. And what's great about it is LinkedIn is really good at having you fill out your profile and putting in all of your experience. And they'll recommend jobs for you. They'll recommend jobs for you based off of your prior experience, what skills you have listed, and all of those great things that go into making your profile. The other thing that LinkedIn does not do that we get accustomed to in Handshake is you can't filter it by internships specifically. So when we're looking in LinkedIn, we want to make sure that we put internship in the actual search bar. But you can still do this by company, you can do it by location, and the other thing is you can save jobs, just like as we had said before, by clicking the flag, and you can set up specific job alerts. And so any jobs that you've looked up previously, it will send you a job alert if a job like that pops up again, or you can search for specific jobs within the job alerts tab, and they'll again send you jobs that work for you. I think job alerts can often be an underutilized feature, but it's a great feature. Like I said, it brings the jobs to you rather than you having to kind of sift through all of the different ones that are available. So again, in LinkedIn, get in here, play around, see what filters and jobs sites work for you, and see if that might be one that you might want to utilize a little bit more than the other ones that you've been using. Now with Vault, Vault is a little bit different. So with Vault, we actually have a university access to Vault, and you do as a student. So as long as you are logging in from the Career Center website or through Handshake to Vault, you will have access to all of the guides that they have available, all of the resources that they put on here, and then of course their job and internship search functions. So there's a couple of ways that we can look at internships and jobs on here specifically. So if you click on internships here and type in, for example, if we do computer science. Now this won't necessarily show you internships that are available, but what it will show you is internship programs that other students have done or that are available. So if I click on this one, I can read all about the program, see when it is, figure out how to apply, how many people they take. And the really cool thing about Vault is they have these intern reviews. So I can see how other interns liked this program specifically, what they had to say about it, if they liked it, if they think it's worth it for other students. Judging by this one, this looks like a pretty great program. But if I'm looking for jobs and internships right now, I need something right now, I'm going to go to this jobs tab at the top. And under here, again, we can't filter it by an internship specifically, but we want to include that in the keywords. And as you can see, as of the latest jobs that are posted, most of the ones that are on here are internships. But you can still filter it by things like location and distance and things like that. You can set up job alerts on here as well that will actually go to an email. So that's another great way. The other thing that we cannot do in Vault is save jobs for later. So any jobs that you find on here, you'll probably want to either keep a spreadsheet or apply right then and there. So that was a very brief and quick overview of all of those different resources that we kind of offer of those 3 specific job sites. But I would say of all of the ones that we see, these, at least Handshake and LinkedIn, are by far the most popular ones that I think students are using right now. But I think Vault is an underutilized tool by our students that can help a lot, especially in the prep stages. So they have those guides available, they have those resources, those intern reviews, and things like that. So make sure that you're checking out these specifically if you're kind of lost in those early stages. So the next thing I want to talk about is finding the right position. So at this point, we have looked through our job boards, we found the ones that worked for us, and now we are looking through all of these different positions to try to figure out which ones to apply for. So here's some things to kind of keep in mind. Number one is know what you want to gain from the experience that you're searching for. So if you are looking for an internship and you know that maybe you want to work for this company in the future, or you want to gain skills in this specific program or tool or clinic, then you kind of have already set up some goals for yourself as far as what you want to gain. You know that when you're looking through these opportunities, you want to find a job that maybe has upward mobility, or it has the ability to go full time after the internship, things like that. And then when we are talking about setting some goals for ourselves, we really want to look at, again, what we want to gain and how that applies to that specific job. So let's say you know that you're going to be going into an entry level position, but within 2 or 3 years, maybe you want to move up in the company. You want to move to a manager level, a senior level, things like that. So you really want to make sure that you're setting those goals for yourself right at the beginning when you're looking through these jobs and opportunities, so that you're not pigeonholing yourself into a job that either won't last that long, or one that you won't like, or one that you'll get into and decide almost immediately that you've made the wrong choice. Set some of these early goals, look at how that applies to what the company does, to what other people at the company have done, and see if that is the right fit for you. And a lot of this can be done by asking the right questions. So internships, for example, a lot of the times they'll specify, we take 20 interns and 50 to 70% of those will receive a full-time job offer at the end of that internship. That's great. If that's the company you want to work for, those might be the types of internships that you should seek in your search. If you just want to gain a specific skill, so again with internships, we're going to work a lot with Excel, and you want to work with Excel and you want to learn that, then knowing that right off the bat and asking those questions, what types of skills can I gain here? What types of programs are we working with? If pay is very important to you, making sure you're asking that question right off the bat and searching for those jobs. Again, so you're not setting yourself up for disappointment quickly in the future. The next thing that you'll want to do is a self-evaluation. And so this is, again, something that you'll probably want to do very early on. And this can be through just looking over your resume and highlighting those kind of key skills that you can pull out. Or you can do a more formal self-evaluation, something like MBTI, Myers-Briggs, or Strengths Quest, and finding your strengths and then comparing those strengths that you see within yourself to those specific job descriptions. And again, this is setting ourselves up for success. If you know that you're extremely organized, you have, great experience in Python or something like that, you can look at the skills that you have, doing that self-evaluation, and compare it to those jobs and opportunities. So right off the bat, I'm the right person for this job. So you go into that application and that interview process with great confidence. And then lastly, you want to be flexible. And again, this kind of goes back to this time that we're in of the pandemic with COVID. A lot of opportunities have been kind of erased, have been taken off the board. That doesn't mean that there's not still opportunities out there for people, but you want to not be so closed-minded to different types of opportunities. I suggest having at least plans A through D. So if plan A doesn't work out, that exact job that you've always wanted isn't available or isn't hiring right now, then we move on to plan B. What is the next job that I could see myself gaining a lot of skills and making progress in? What's the next internship opportunity that I can look at? Be flexible in your search so that you don't get overly bogged down by a rejection of this one type of job, the only type of job that you can see yourself in. If you have several different plans, several different job types or experiences that you're looking at, the more success you're likely to have in just getting your foot in the door for those different types of opportunities. Okay, so now we're going to talk about reaching out. So at this point in your search, maybe you have looked through these job boards, you've identified some different jobs, and either you want to know more about that industry before you make your selection, or like we talked about earlier, maybe word of mouth is going to be the best way for you to get into the specific industry that you're trying to get into. And I love the statistic that's on this slide that 85% of positions are filled through networking. Networking is so important. So throughout our job search, before we've spent hours upon hours, searching through job boards, searching through Handshake and things like that, that we are reaching out to our greatest asset, to our network. Especially when we have professional social media sites such as LinkedIn, and you guys are all connected to the university in some way, shape, or form, you have a great network starting out. So make those connections, make new connections, and reach out to the current network that you have. And when you do this, I have a few tips for how we need to reach out. So number one is be specific in your request to whoever you're networking with, to whoever you're connecting to. So if that means you would really like to learn more about a specific industry or job or field, that when you reach out to somebody, you specify, hey, I found you on LinkedIn. I see that you've worked for this company for this long. I'm really interested in also working for that company, or I'm really interested in the type of work that you're doing, and I would love to sit down and talk with you for just a few minutes on, your job as a whole, how you got started there, and things like that. So being very specific in what you're asking for will lead to greater success in actually getting an answer from somebody on that network. What we don't want to do is ask for a job. So we don't want to be blasting out multiple emails or multiple LinkedIn connections just saying, hey, do you have any jobs available? You're very much less likely to get a response when you just straight out ask for a job. More people are going to want to kind of talk you through the process or talk you through their industry or talk you through their job. They're not going to just kind of hand out jobs, especially if they don't know you very well or at all. And if you're kind of asking them to just look at your LinkedIn and say, hey, what jobs work for me? You need to offer a little bit more information than that. So next is take up little of their time. So when we're asking for a sit down conversation or coffee or a video call or a phone call, we want to specify that, we're only taking 10, 15 minutes of their time to kind of just get an introduction into whatever the field is, whatever the job is, whatever the opportunity is. People in the working world are very busy. Very few times will they have an entire hour that they can set aside to talk to somebody about these things. So if you specify, hey, I'm just looking for 10, 15, 30 minutes max of your time to talk about this industry and your experience in it, you're much more likely to get a response of somebody that can set aside that type of time. And lastly is to say thank you. Say thank you when you've sent the communication, send thank you after you've sat down with that person or talked with that person. Showing your appreciation goes a long way in every industry. So making sure that you are thanking them right up front for taking up their time, just having read your message, and then going out of their way to actually meet with you. It's a really big deal. So make sure you're showing appreciation. I do want to specify a sample communication, what this can look like, based off of any type of communication that you're looking for, any type of advice that you're looking for. So this is kind of written out in an email format, but you can format this to anything, to a LinkedIn conversation, kind of to any field that you're looking for. So as we can see through this example, we're being specific. So in our subject right off the bat, we're saying we're looking for advice about this. This person sent me to you for your advice. This person, I know this person through you. We went to the same school for advice, for information, for whatever it might be. Being specific right off the bat. And then in the body of our message, of course, it works out well if you have a mutual acquaintance, but even if you don't, you can start off with, based on what I know about you or the industry or your job specifically, this is what I've realized. This is what I want to know. This is why I'm picking your brain. Again, you want to be very specific about what you're searching for, why you've reached out to this person specifically, and how much of their time you're going to take up. And as you can see in here, the example that was given, it's clear you've had a successful career. Some flattery can go a long way. So if you can put something like that in there, that works too. Especially if you're making a random connection with a LinkedIn person and you've kind of viewed their profile, you see that they've been in the industry for a very long time. This can be a nice little plug of, hey, I've noticed that you've been in this industry for a long time. You've worked in many different roles. I would love to pick your brain for 10 minutes. Again, be specific on the time frame. Take up very little of their time. And then end it with the thank you. So feel free to take a screenshot of this specifically. I put where I actually got this from at the bottom of the screen too. And use this kind of as your template when you're sending out these different communications if networking is the way that you're going. And I definitely think it should be included in your process. Okay, so assuming that we have gone through our job boards, picked out specific jobs, networked with all of the right people, we're probably at the stage where we're ready to apply. So when it comes to applying, the number one thing that we want to do is keep our resume up to date. There is nothing more annoying than when you sit down to apply for that first job or those first 5 jobs and you realize you haven't updated your resume in 6 months to a year and it's all out of date. So number one, stay up to date with your resume. And on that, you also want to tailor your resume and your individual cover letter to the specific positions that you're applying for. So look through those job descriptions, see what they're looking for, figure out if you've highlighted that well in your resume, and pick out keywords and things that match your resume that you can put in there. And that kind of goes along with who's looking at your application. So for a lot of jobs and internships, a recruiter might be the first person that sees your application. If it's a very technical job, the recruiter might not know a lot about the specifics of the industry. They might not know the jargon. So you'll want to think, if a recruiter is looking at my resume or cover letter, then I might want to explain things a little bit more. I might want to put more context here. I want to definitely make sure I'm using keywords from the job description so that they know that this is what I'm referring to and they'll be able to better see the fit. Oftentimes, too, the first person that's looking at your application isn't a person at all. It might be an applicant tracking system. So again, this is an area where we want to make sure that we've read the job description and that those things are clearly stated in either our resume or cover letter so that the robot that reads your application for the first time knows that you're the best fit and you will be more likely to be passed on to an actual person for a second set of eyes or an interview. Next is we want to make sure we're checking the required qualifications. So before you apply to any job, obviously we need to make sure that we are actually qualified. There's usually 2 sets of qualifications listed. There's the required qualifications and then there's the preferred qualifications. When it comes to the required qualifications, we want to make sure we are hitting all of those because those are the hard stops. That's what, if the person doesn't match all of these types of required qualifications, you're much less likely to get passed on to the next round. When it comes to the preferred qualifications, you might have a couple of these things, but you might not have all of them. And that's okay. They are preferred. They are not required for that job. But if you have it, then that's great. Make sure it's highlighted because it's probably going to give you an edge up on other people. But make sure we're reading those job descriptions before we're sending in those applications to make sure that we are actually qualified for the jobs to give us more success in getting to the next round. And then last is pay attention to application instructions. This might sound silly on the front end, but hear me out. If you're applying for a job through Handshake or a different job board, it might say, click this button and apply here. It might say, email your resume to this person. It might say, email your resume and answer this question. It might say, provide references. Not every application is going to look exactly the same. And when we're applying for many different jobs kind of all at once, or in a shorter time frame, we can get confused. We can get confused about what jobs, required this and which jobs required that. And simply messing up sending in the correct application in the way that they wanted it can be an automatic elimination from that job. So this is something that we really want to pay attention to. I actually once worked for somebody who was very strict about the way that people applied for the jobs, and she would use it as kind of an elimination tactic that if you didn't follow the instructions to the T, your resume might not even get looked at. So make sure that when you're applying for these different jobs, we're looking at what they require, we have all of our documents ready, and we know we've answered all of the questions. Now, how can we stand out amongst all of the different resumes and applications that are sitting on the desk? Number one is to be yourself. Throughout this application process, you're going to get really bogged down in the skills of it. You're going to want to make sure you're matching every sort of job description and that your skill set is the greatest that's there. But it's likely that almost every person that's applying for that job is going to have a very similar skill set. So we want to separate ourselves by being authentic, by being personal, by sharing a little bit more about ourselves. And that can be done throughout the resume and throughout the cover letter. Next is to be as responsive, reliable, and adaptable as possible. Again, this kind of goes without saying, during this time with the pandemic, it can be really easy to have to change things at the last minute, or for different types of interviews to get changed. We're dealing with a lot of different technical difficulties and things like that. So we want to make sure that if employers are reaching out to us, we are responding as quickly as possible. That when they schedule an interview with us, that we are showing up on time, and that if an interview has to get changed or some technical difficulty arises, we are being adaptable and flexible to that. Throughout your interview process and speaking with the different employers that you might be talking to, it's important that you speak your mind and ask questions. So making sure that, one, we're asking the right questions, going back to those goals that we had. Again, showing your personality throughout the way that you're answering questions. And when we ask questions, we do it with intent. Asking questions throughout this process shows your interest in an opportunity and how knowledgeable you are about different opportunities. So make sure that you have some questions prepared, that you're asking the right questions, and again, you're being yourself throughout this process. And this next one kind of sounds funny too, but answer calls from unknown numbers. Especially if you're in the midst of your application process, you might be getting a lot of different calls from people that you don't know. And so it's important that it's easy for people to get a hold of us during this time. So even if you don't know the number, answer the phone. And on that note, make sure that if somebody has to leave a voicemail for you, that you have a professional recording available and that your inbox is clear, so that if somebody is trying to get a hold of you, it's easy for them to do. So our next step in our process is interviewing. And I'm going to go a little bit quickly through this part because I do have a video that's going to kind of explain this a little bit better. So the number one thing, no matter how our interview goes, whether it's in person or online, we want to practice. So making sure that we know our sample answers to those most frequently asked questions. And we can use platforms like Interview Stream, which the University Career Center offers through our website, which is a mock interview platform to actually practice our interviewing skills. You can even just sit down with a career consultant or a friend, but just make sure you practice. Number two is dress for success. Even if you're on a video or a phone call, you want to dress up a little bit. It shows your confidence through your voice when you do dress up. And when you're on a video, we want to dress up just as if we were kind of face to face with a person. Next is being on time. So obviously when you are doing an in-person interview, we want to be there about 10 to 15 minutes early to mitigate any issues that we might have. And additionally, when we are on a video call, we want to make sure that we have all of the technology set up the way that it needs to be and that we know how to use it. There's nothing worse than the interview time starting and you're still fumbling through the video to get started. Next, we want to make sure that we are avoiding distractions. So make sure your phone is off for those in-person and video interviews. And if you are in a virtual setting, that we're going to a quiet place with no distractions. We let everybody know in our household that we're going to be on a call for a while. Next is asking questions, which I've kind of already covered. So have 2 or 3 questions in mind to show that your interviewers that you are interested, and it's expected that you have a few questions throughout this process. And lastly is send a thank you. So when you've finished your interview process, make sure that you're following up with whoever that you interviewed with or the people that you interviewed with. A handwritten letter is still appreciated, but if there's not time for that, you can definitely send an email, especially if you had a video interview. Go ahead and send an email within 24 to 48 hours. Just showing your appreciation and gratitude for the experience. Now, there are multiple different types of interviews. I'm going to go through this part kind of quickly as well. We've all kind of had experience with a lot of these, especially in this time. Some of the ones that you might be less familiar with are interviews like an online test. So an online test will often be used before an interview process to show things test things like a technical ability, such as how you use a computer, a personality test, or to ask different situational questions. This is often used before we get to any part of a face-to-face interview or a phone interview. The next common interview type would be the phone screen. And so again, this is often used early on just to kind of get to know the applicant a little bit better and see if we want to invite them in for a more in-depth interview. A phone screen looks a little bit more like a conversation where you're just kind of talking about the job. You might just be talking to a recruiter. But in this day and age, especially, phone interviews might be the entirety of your experience. You might talk to every single person on the phone. That's not out of the question. So you have to be prepared for that as well. Next would be the face-to-face interview. And so this is our more traditional interview where you're sitting kind of across the desk or a table from somebody and being asked different types of questions. And these are just used to kind of get to know the candidate better and assess the fit with the company. Another type of face-to-face interview is the video interview. As we've seen, we've transitioned to this quite a bit, especially now. So this interview would probably take place live with a person, or it might take place as a recording. And so if you're less familiar with this, it can be kind of weird, but in that awesome resource that I told you about, Interview Stream, that is a great place that kind of tests these types of recorded interviews. The next interview type is a panel. And so a panel would be multiple people from the employer and one candidate, you, kind of being asked different questions by these people. There's a couple of reasons that an employer would use this. One is so that multiple different people from the office get to meet the candidate. And then the other one would be to kind of add a stressful component for the candidate, as mean as that might sound. And then lastly, we have group interviews. And so group interviews are really for multiple candidates. So it would be multiple candidates and either multiple or one person from the employer. And this kind of shows how different candidates talk to each other, how they communicate, how they interact. And this could often be used for a mass hiring, especially in an internship. So now I have a quick video. I think we'll have enough time to get through this. My next few slides, I can send out the information too if we don't. But this video is really important in kind of talking about how we can best show our etiquette in a phone or video interview setting.
In popularity, especially with phone interviews, are already standard operating procedure for most companies, and video interviews are growing in popularity, especially with the rise in telecommuting and remote jobs. It would be a mistake to prepare for these interviews in the same way that you'd prepare for an in-person interview. The experience is just too different and it requires its own tactics. And that's what we're going to cover now, the do's and don'ts for nailing phone and video job interviews. First, let's cover the do's and don'ts that apply to both types of interviews. You'll want to pick a quiet spot to have the interview and remove any distractions. Clean up random objects on your desk, put the dog in the other room, and shut the door so your kids don't walk in. Then Gather your necessary documents. The only things you'll need are a copy of your job description, your resume, a list of talking points for common interview questions, a list of important information about the company and your interviewer, and your phone or computer. Always test your technology ahead of time, especially for video interviews. Make sure you're sitting in a place with reliable phone reception, or if you're using a landline, that's even better. Test your internet connection for a video interview, and if possible, do a few test runs with the video conferencing software you're going to use, such as Skype. Turn off notifications, alerts, and sounds that might pop up on your phone or computer. And finally, teach yourself to be comfortable with pauses and silence. There's no visual cue to tell you when you've sufficiently answered an interviewer's question, so when you've said enough, stop talking and give them a chance to chime in. Now let's focus on phone interviews. Play along with me for a second. Imagine you're in an office in the middle of a job interview. Now close your eyes. All of a sudden, you can't see the people interviewing you. You lose key visuals like someone's crossed arms, eye contact, or smile. Is it easier or more difficult to continue the conversation? For most of us, it would clearly be more difficult. And that's what we're all faced with during a phone interview. Let's go over a couple best practices for phone interviews. Even though the interviewer can't see you, make sure you smile. Smiling while speaking helps your inflection, making you sound friendly and positive. Have a pen and paper on hand to take notes. Don't use a keyboard to type the notes because the clicking of the keys is distracting over the phone. Instead, write down important names, phone numbers, email addresses, or facts about the job or people you'll be working with. For video interviews, there are also a few considerations, so let's go over those now. Before the interview, try to eliminate any technical difficulties that might pop up. Get familiar with the video software beforehand and optimize your computer, camera, and microphone for the interviewer. Ask a friend or family member to help you test them. If your audio doesn't sound good, consider using a small headset with a microphone to improve the quality. Next, choose the best space for your video interview. You'll want a room with a lot of light so you show up clearly on the video. Also, make sure that the area that will be seen in your computer's camera is clutter-free and clean. Try to find a neutral backdrop like a blank wall or a nice painting. Pay attention to your posture and eye contact. Sitting up straight helps you breathe easier and it looks better on camera. Try to look at the camera as much as possible, more so than the screen. It's awkward, but to the interviewer, it'll look like you're making eye contact. So remember to pay attention to your environment, eliminate distractions, and keep only the bare necessities out during your phone or video interview. Practice ahead of time and double check all your technical components. Taking these extra steps to prepare for a phone or video interview will make a huge difference in the quality of your performance and help you stand out as a top candidate for the job. Which of these job interview answers are you more likely to remember?
Okay. So that was just a really good, quick overview over these different types of virtual interviews that we might be experiencing right now. And I think there's some really good content on there about how to best prepare for these, especially because that's how most of these different interviews are going to take place over the next 6 months to a year and right now. So the next thing that I really want to talk about is some of the resources that we have. I've highlighted a few of these throughout, but on the University Career Center webpage, you can find all of these resources that I've talked about, including Handshake, Vault. You have access to LinkedIn Learning through the university, which is where I actually got that video. So I highly suggest that you make sure that you are signed up to receive LinkedIn Learning through the university. You can go to the library's website to do so. There's a lot of great videos on there about all of these different topics that we've covered. But if you go to the University Career Center page, or if you go to our Handshake page, you will find all of our resources there. Next, I want to briefly talk about the impact that COVID has had on the job and internship market. So I've included a few graphs throughout. These are a little bit older graphs, so they're slightly outdated, but the information is still pretty valid within. So as this one shows, we at the beginning of the pandemic and throughout, we lost 22.2 million jobs, and we've recovered about 42% of those. The number of jobs lost has actually increased since this graph came out to closer to 30 million, but we are starting to see certain jobs make their way back. Certain industries were hit a lot harder than others. Our retail, restaurant, tourism industries were hit very hard with job losses. So this is why it's important to remain flexible, to understand that employers are going through this pandemic just as much as we are, and having some sort of understanding that as much as they would love to hire as many people as they had before, they just might not be able to. And specifically when it comes to the internship market, we saw very similar statistics. This again is very early on. So this was from March to April. We actually saw a decline in over 50% of internship opportunities. And again, this is something that we've started to see creep back up. The number is getting a little bit more narrow. More internships have started to come back as employers have been able to pivot and change their internships to work either virtually or on a more minimal basis. And I don't show you these things to scare you away from the job or internship search or to kind of deter you from looking for these opportunities, but there is an understanding that needs to be made that a lot of people had to pivot throughout the last 6 to 7 months to make changes to allow for people to still have different job and internship opportunities. And this is why we really want to remain flexible in our search, especially if we're looking in these areas that were hit a lot harder. So just kind of keep these things in mind when you're looking, that it might take a little bit longer than it did in the past, and it might be a little bit more frustrating, but there are still opportunities out there. We're starting to see them come back, and we're starting to see internships pivot and be able to take a lot more students. On that note, there are other ways to gain experiences besides through a job or an internship search. And I just wanted to highlight a few of these. So one of them is to volunteer. Many organizations are still taking volunteers right now. And all of these ways that I'm kind of highlighting here, you can put on a resume to show your skills, to show your experience. So if you're really passionate about a specific organization, then show that by volunteering. Another thing you can do is join an organization. So UTD actually has over 300 different student orgs that you can join. And it's really easy to jump into a leadership role and gain leadership experience and organization experience from joining a campus activity. Next is externships, which often aren't talked about a lot either. But externships are these more job shadowing opportunities. And we actually offer a program called Explore the World of Work that pairs up students with companies for these different externship opportunities. And if you want to know more about that, feel free to send us an email or ask us a question in the chat, and I'm happy to send out information. We do have an info session for that coming up too, which I'll show on the next slide. The last thing that I want to talk about is class projects. So I think a lot of students underutilize this aspect of their resume and putting in ways that they have gained skills through different projects that they've done in courses, especially for those students that have less experience, that haven't done as many internships or part-time jobs. You've probably in a technical field done a lot of these different class projects, and it's a great way to show the skills that you have on your resume. So if you need help kind of tailoring any of these experiences that you've had to specific jobs or on your resume, make an appointment with the Career Center, and we're happy to help you throughout that and tailoring your resume to these different opportunities. That was a lot. I know. I'm sorry. I had to kind of rush through those last slides, but please let me know whatever questions you have. I'm happy to stay on for a few extra minutes if we have a lot of questions. You can also email us at utdinterns@utdallas.edu with any of your questions that linger afterwards. So with that, do we have any questions, Alyssa?
Yeah, we do have one question that I wasn't able to get to. What if I'm an international student and the job requires U.S. work authorization?
Okay. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, I mean, there's a couple of ways I can answer this. So one is we want to be upfront in our job search with if we are an international student and we require sponsorship, telling the employer that. I know that it might be harder to gain experience like that because employers might not want to pay for the sponsorship for that student, but it is also important to kind of reveal that information so that the employer is aware. For specific questions, as far as CPT and OPT, ISSO is really the best office to ask for if you have specific questions on gaining that. But as far as if you're looking for opportunities, there are plenty of them out there still for international students. And on Handshake, there actually is a filter for students that are looking for opportunities that require CPT and OPT. So I hope that kind of answers. I don't know if somebody else on the call, Brianna or Alyssa, has a better answer for that, but that's kind of bare bones.
Hi, Kayla. I can jump in.
Yeah.
Alyssa, can you ask the question one more time just to make sure I heard it correctly?
Yeah, sure thing. What if I'm an international student and the job requires U.S. work authorization?
Yes, and so the short answer with that one is no. If you see in there and it says that it requires the U.S. work authorization, then you won't be eligible for that internship position under CPT. But like Kayla mentioned, we have several positions on Handshake that do offer CPT, and of course you should probably already know that you're able and eligible to work in the United States on CPT for 364 days for full-time CPT. And so what I would encourage you to do is exactly what Kayla said, is filtered by those jobs on Handshake or any other kind of search engine that you may be using. But if it specifically asks for U.S. work authorization only, then you won't be able to apply for that particular position.
Correct. Thank you for the clarification there. Yeah, I kind of missed that last part. Work authorization you would need for that. I see Alyssa did another question come in right after that one.
Yeah. We have somebody asking about what the average length of an internship is.
Yeah, so this kind of depends on a few things. So one, depending on what major you're in or what school you're in, there might be a specific requirement. There probably is a specific requirement for the number of hours that you need to work in an internship, or at least the number of hours that you need to work per week in an internship. As far as an average length goes, for like a summer internship, those tend to be the length of the entire summer. What we would suggest based off of what we think would give the student the most experience and the best for them to actually have had a fulfilling experience throughout that is basically anything that's about 8 weeks plus, where you're working at least 10 hours a week. And that gives you a good amount of experience throughout where you can really kind of get into more of the job besides a base level. But as far as an average, every industry is going to be a little bit different. Every experience is going to be a little bit different. You'll find some that are 2 months. You'll find some that are 6 months. Some students might work in an internship for an entire year. So I can't say that there's a baseline average. But definitely if you're looking for an opportunity, the first thing that you're going to want to do is look at what your school might require of you to have an internship as far as hours go. All right. Do we have any more questions at this time?
I'm not seeing any come in, so I think we're done.
Awesome. All right. So thank you everyone for your participation today and asking such wonderful questions. There will be a recording of this available in a week or so. And that will be put up on our Career Center YouTube page. Again, if you do have any questions that kind of linger or pop up afterward, feel free to email us at utdinterns@utdallas.edu or check out our website at career.utdallas.edu to kind of answer some of those questions that we might have already answered on our website. So thank you everyone for coming today and have a great rest of your day.